Alexis, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you here, Alexis. For those who don't know you, Alexis Allen is an Agile coach. She's a Scrum Master and she's an IT project manager with 10 years of experience in IT infrastructure and software projects, working for some of the best known organizations in the world, including MGM and Boeing. She also has an exciting and rapidly growing YouTube channel, but it needs to grow faster. So get over there and have a look after you've watched this video. Alexis will tell you where to find it. But she has a real passion for project management and, in particular, for organizational and people-based processes. And as soon as you hear her speak, you'll see what a style she has and how I think people will gravitate to her. Her channel is, really magnetic for me. And she's constantly learning more as well. Currently focused on Agile Transformation. She believes in empowering her teams and coaches as a Scrum Master in the best project practices. And it's because of her deep experience of Scrum that I wanted to talk to Alexis today. So it's great to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
So, Alexis, can you kick us off by telling us what Scrum is?
Yeah, sure. So when I think of Scrum, Scrum is considered an agile delivery framework, which can be a lot of buzzy words in there. And really, it's just a way to deliver work. It's what it is. It prescribes to you a set of artifacts, of events, and of values to efficiently and to effectively deliver work. And this can be from software projects to more tangible projects. You can really use Scrum for an array of projects, really.
Excellent. And a lot of people will be like me, I suspect, haven't yet been properly involved in Agile projects and Scrum projects in particular. So how would you say that Scrum differs from the more traditional predictive project management methodologies? Sometimes people call those waterfall methodologies. It's not a term I like, but we all know what the term means. So how does Scrum in particular differ from that?
I would say that Scrum differs from more predictive project management in that it slices the work in bite sizes versus these large phases.
Yeah.
So when we're working in Scrum, we're working in what is called sprints. And so those can be from anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks. And during that time, you pretty much have a small project. And so you're doing all the activities that you would do in a predictive project. You're doing requirements, you're doing design, development, testing. And in my case, I'm talking about software projects going all the way to deployment. So all of that's happening within these sprints versus in a more predictive approach, we're having a large set of requirements up front, design, and so everything's happening in more of these phases and not necessarily limited to a time box.
And Scrum, of course, is an agile methodology. So what is particular to Scrum that isn't the generic agile approach?
Well, I would say, so with Agile, there's two approaches that are most common. With Scrum, it's going to be Scrum and Kanban. There's a few others as well. And you can actually mix and match the methodologies, of course, of what you need. So in terms of general Agile, I would say Agile is more of a mindset itself. So Agile doesn't necessarily prescribe any way of actually delivering your work or managing your projects. It's more so values and principles. So from that perspective, I would say Scrum is actually the most used Agile framework. So a lot of times people will interchange Agile with Scrum, which isn't exactly correct, but it's an easy mistake to make because they're so similarly used. When we're talking about Agile, we're usually talking about, or could be talking about, Scrum as well.
Yeah. So when would we choose to use Scrum as a method over other methods? What types of projects and for what reasons is Scrum best suited?
Yeah. So Scrum is best suited for those environments where there's some uncertainty and there's complexity in whatever is being built. Versus if we're using something like a more predictive approach, this tends to be better suited for environments where there's less uncertainty, there's more that's known up front. And so the rule of thumb that I like to see is that when we're talking about intangible projects, which are usually IT projects, depending on the nature of those projects, usually Scrum can be a good fit for it because there's a heavy emphasis on inspection and adaptation in Scrum.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to have several points in which you stop and you reflect on what you're doing versus what I've seen in more predictive projects is that sometimes that reflection doesn't come towards the end of the phases and you can't really implement it and integrate it into what you're currently doing, right? So it really just depends on kind of the environment that you're in, and it comes down to whether you can be certain about the requirements up front, and then also how complex the service or the project is that you're working on.
Mm. And you use the word adaptation, and sometimes Scrum is described as an adaptive methodology. So just people, because not everyone who's watching this will have English as a first language or will really have thought about this. So what do Scrum practitioners and Agilists mean when you use the word adaptive or adaptation?
Yeah. So when I think of adaptive or adaptation, it's really being able to, there's a heavy emphasis also on empiricism, so experience. Mm-hmm. And so being able to use your experience to adapt the process to your needs. So Scrum does prescribe, like I mentioned earlier, artifacts, events. And so there's kind of like a minimum set of things that you need to do, but otherwise there's a lot of flexibility in terms of what the teams can do in the process to make it work for them. And so that emphasis on adaptation is going to be pausing, like I was saying earlier, and taking a look at your process, taking a look at your project and your process to see where can you make some tweaks or adjustments to become more efficient and effective in delivery.
Excellent. So it's like, I suppose those of us who have not worked in Scrum but have worked in project management, we think about those lessons learned reviews periodically through it. It sounds to me like Scrum really formalizes that process of learning the lessons and then applying them directly at the next iteration.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yep, that's exactly it. Yeah, when we think of, so lessons learned in Scrum is called retrospectives, so a way of looking back. And so that's something that happens over every sprint. It's meant to be an environment where it's a safe space for the team, where they can look at their process and look at the project and see what are changes that they can make and what are the things that are actually going well. So there's a heavy emphasis on it. Even when I've been kind of tested to become certified and everything, sometimes there's questions around, about retrospectives and the importance of the event. So it's definitely refreshing to see, coming from a traditional project management background, where sometimes the lessons learned kind of fall flat. It's nice to see, to be in an environment where there's a heavy emphasis on it. So it's just nice to be a part of that.
I like that, because one of my gripes with lessons learned when I was leading projects day to day and supporting new project managers is actually rather like risk registers with some other project managers. Lessons learned for some people seems to be about documenting stuff rather than actually the team taking those lessons to improve their practice and to grow their careers as well.
Yes.
I think for me, and possibly for other people, one of the most confusing things about Scrum and Scrum project management is, and you describe yourself as an Agile Coach, a Scrum Master, and an IT project manager.
Yeah.
So I think you know what question's coming up now.
Sure.
Where's the project manager in Scrum? Because if you look at anything, I've looked at a few videos and a few books about Scrum, and Scrum doesn't talk about project managers. So where's your job?
No, and that's a fair question. And it's something that can be really alarming to project managers. I know when I made the switch from traditional project management into Scrum, I was kind of funneled into the Scrum Master role without really being given enough coaching and context into what that meant and even what the Scrum Master was. And so it really depends on, to answer the question of where's the project manager in Scrum, it depends on the organization and how far they are in their Agile transformation.
Yeah.
So in general, Scrum teams, the project manager responsibilities are distributed amongst the team. And so in that environment, you're not likely to see a project manager, but this is in the sense that we're actually seeing teams doing everything kind of perfectly. And so oftentimes in the organizations that I'm part of, there's still project managers. And so where project managers can fit in that space is It could be that there's teams that still need to collaborate with each other, or there's cross-team projects. And so that's where the project manager will come in. It's also possible that the project manager can, like myself, play multiple hats. So depending on the nature of the project, I might be more of a pure kind of project manager collecting information from these different teams and managing the project that way. Or it could be that I'm actually taking on the role of being a Scrum Master and all of what that means. And so having to have a mindset shift. So you're right in that Scrum does not acknowledge the formal project manager role. Instead, it distributes the responsibilities. But there still is an opportunity, I think, for project managers to add value to the Scrum team if they're willing to step into one of the three roles. Or if it's that the organization still has a need for that kind of coordination and managing to happen across teams.
You said a couple of things there that I want to revisit and clarify. So just so that I remember them, the first one was you said there's a mindset shift going from project management to Scrum Master. So I definitely want to understand your perspective on what that mindset shift is. But the other thing is you mentioned three roles. So can you just tell us what those three roles are and give us a little pen portrait of the what the role's about?
Sure. Yeah, so in Scrum, there are three roles that are identified. First is the product owner. And the product owner is going to be the person who owns the product itself, as well as the subsequent projects that are built as a part of that product. They are what I like to think as the CEO of the product. So they determine the features and the requirements that are going to be built on what's called a roadmap. And pretty much you can think of as a roadmap as a high level schedule of when features are going to be delivered.
Yeah.
And so next we have the Scrum Master, who is considered an Agile coach, and it's going to be the person who's coaching the team on the Scrum framework, on the Scrum process. And really, this is more of a servant leader role where you're guiding the team versus telling the team what to do. This is where the mindset shift comes in. It's of helping to coach the team through the process and getting that understanding and that ownership. And finally, we have the developers, and this is going to be the set of individuals who are going to build the product or the service that's being provided.
Excellent. Yeah, and I'm glad you used the word servant or the phrase servant leadership, because it has always been my kind of favorite sort of approach or underlying philosophy to leadership. And I think there was something really interesting you said about a Scrum team. Actually, everyone is acting partly as a project manager. And whilst I can struggle from my experience to see how you can distribute the role of project manager effectively, I think the role of distributing the role of leader seems to me to be very kind of practical approach, but a hard ideal to reach. But the fact that everyone can step into a leadership role as and when they feel that that's right for them, I really like that. So in describing what the Scrum Master role is, you said there's the start of our understanding of the mindset shift. So given that you've touched on some of my really favorite concepts and things I really believe in, I'm keen to hear how you interpret that mindset shift and what are the key elements.
Yeah, so the mindset shift being, especially when we see project managers step into the role of Scrum Master, is typically the mindset, or, speaking from my experience as a traditional project manager, you are the owner of the project. So if the project goes well or it doesn't go well, you're the person that people are looking to, right? And so there's a lot of pressure that comes with that, and there's a lot of implication on the success of the project or the failure. And so typically that can drive more of directional behavior, where it's giving more direction to the team and telling them what you need, versus when we see Scrum Masters, instead of there being a focus on the project, there's a focus on the process and on the team and helping them to deliver effectively. So the questions that you ask, the dynamic with the team, all of that shifts. And that honestly, sometimes it's hard for the team if they've worked traditionally with this project manager and now the whole team is changing. It's not even just a mindset shift for the Scrum Master, it's also for the team. If they're used to seeing this person in a PM role, and now we just kind of put on different hats, they're going to stay in that dynamic.
Yeah.
So there's mindset shifts, I would say, for anyone who is stepping into Scrum. And a lot of it is really about, for Scrum Masters, that servant leader kind of approach. For product owners, it's going to be, it depends on where they're kind of stepping into things
Yeah.
from, but really taking an ownership of the roadmap. And then for the developers, it's going to be finding their voice. Sometimes developers are so used to being told what they're going to do. The
Yeah.
fact that there's someone asking them, what do you think is best? You're now responsible for determining how this is built.
Yeah.
The project manager is not going to tell you that.
Yeah.
So there's all these kinds of mindset shifts that's required for anyone who's stepping into a Scrum environment.
Yeah. And it's very easy to see how when people talk about agile transformations of organizations, you can see why it's actually quite a difficult transformation to make, because quite a lot of people whose primary role is doing and delivering and creating, whether they're software developers or any other kind of product development role, to actually go from fulfilling a brief to actually taking responsibility for creating the brief as well. It's a big ask. And also, I get a sense that a big part of the Scrum Master role is actually learning how to coach effectively. And yes. I know that a Scrum Master isn't the same as a Scrum Coach, and maybe I can sneak in a question on that in a moment. But the challenge with coaching, of course, is it only really works if people are prepared to be coached. And so you've got to create that mindset shift in the people you're coaching. Otherwise, you're just going to have this big clash of, I want to coach you. No, I just want you to tell me what to do. And I guess that's a challenge when you're coming into a new role.
Yes, that is something that's, I think, really important to highlight as well, because I go through forums every now and then and just try to get, more of an understanding and context in terms of what challenges other Scrum Masters or Agile coaches may face. And exactly what you're saying. Sometimes, Scrum Masters are with the team, and some team members don't really want to be coached for whatever reason. And some of it's, I just want to be told what to do, or I just want to work on my own. So they're like exactly what you're saying. There's definitely a whole bunch of mindset shifts that have to go throughout the team members.
So can I sneak in that question? Because I've seen the kind of the qualifications you can get, and above Scrum Master, I don't know whether it's directly above or somewhere higher in the hierarchy, is this Scrum Coach. And you describe yourself as an Agile Coach, so maybe those are similar things. So what is the kind of Scrum Coach, Agile Coach role specifically?
Yeah, so there's a Scrum Master, and then there's the Agile Coach. So Scrum Coach, I would think of as really just being the Scrum Master, versus an Agile Coach is going to be someone who works not just with their own team, which is what a Scrum Master what a Scrum Master does, but an Agile Coach instead is going to work with multiple teams. And typically they're going to be the person who's kind of the coach for the Scrum Master. They could be the coach for the Scrum Master, or they can be the coach for the team. Yeah. This is where it gets kind of a little messy, because technically a Scrum Master is an Agile Coach. But when I think of Agile Coach, I think of an individual who is coaching multiple teams and perhaps coaching more so the Scrum Master as well, on how to be a better coach.
But that's not so dissimilar to, well, for example, in the world of coaching. I learned my coaching many years ago from John Whitmore. But if you choose to become a professional coach, you would expect to have your own kind of coach to support you. And likewise, when you think about something like Six Sigma, where you will get a black belt supervising. So you might have a supervising coach as a coach, a supervisor in a black. So actually having someone who can support you through the challenges of learning your craft, because you can become a Scrum Master by following a syllabus, passing an exam, and then you're into it. But as we know, it's a lifetime of a career to become superb at it, and the next stage is to help other people to develop. So I like that a lot. So I think my last question on this really is for people who are watching this and thinking, that's actually an appealing way to work, or I see some real opportunities. What's the route or what are the different routes maybe that a project manager can make their transformation from being a more perhaps traditional predictive project manager to working in a Scrum environment and learning the kind of skills you've been talking about?
Yeah, I always say it's a good idea if you can start with where you're at. So if you're working at a current organization and you can see that they have an opportunity where, or you can see that they have teams that are working in this Scrum approach. It would be great if you can shadow someone, if you can see exactly and get that insight into what it actually looks like to perform these various roles. Because I can say for myself, when I stepped into Scrum, it was quite intimidating. I didn't know exactly. I feel like I didn't get enough coaching or insight on it. It was just kind of like, you're being hired as a Scrum Master, but really you're just doing project manager work. And it wasn't until maybe I would say at least a year into that I started to really understand more of, like we were saying earlier, the mindset shifts that come with it. So if someone is wanting to step into a role, into a Scrum role, then I would highly advise them, if they can, if there's some opportunity to shadow someone within their current organization, to start with doing that. I would also encourage to consider looking into the certified Scrum Master certification, because that will give you really good insight into following the Scrum Guide, which is pretty much our guide to Scrum, exactly what it says. It's our way to give us insight. So even reading the Scrum Guide will be helpful to get that context, and just being able to look out for those opportunities where Scrum can potentially be applied, and being able to see if you can step into that in some capacity.
I'll put some links in the description, because I know the Scrum Guide that you're referring to is actually remarkably a free document. It's quite a comprehensive document, and it's available on a couple of different websites, and so anyone can take a look at it. That's great. I like that. Now, let me give you a slightly trickier route in. Let's say, and this, I'm sure this happens, the chief executive is having a conversation over a beer with another chief executive who says, oh, we're transforming our whole business to Agile, and we're getting Scrum Masters in. And next Monday, chief executive comes into the office, picks on one of the project managers and said, we need to go Scrum. And if you get that conversation and you think, actually, that's for me, I'll put my hand up. I want to be at the leading edge of this in my company, but there is no community of support in the organization. What tips would you give that individual?
Then this is going to sound maybe redundant. Go to the Scrum Guide, because there's so much information around Scrum and what that looks like, and how to implement Scrum. But it all comes from the Scrum Guide. So if you start with the Scrum Guide, which, as you mentioned, is a free document, and I think it's about 13 pages. So it's nothing too extensive versus something like the PMBOK Guide. I would never advise someone who's saying, I want to be a project manager, start with reading the PMBOK Guide. So I want to advise those traditional project managers who might be thinking that this is like another version of that. It's only, like I said, 13 to 15 pages. It's really direct and gives you the essence of what needs to be done. And so for that person, I would highly advise them first start with the Scrum Guide. That's always going to be a good place to start, and to continue referring back to, because they update the Scrum Guide every few years.
Yeah. Well, you'd hope that it would be an adaptive process, wouldn't you? And you mentioned, I think, that CSM, Certified Scrum Master, was the qualification you went for. Is that, in retrospect, was that a good choice for you? And would that be a good choice for someone starting?
Yeah, in retrospect, I would say it was good. I wish I would have looked into this sooner in my career. And I think part of that from just not having had the support. So I was just kind of doing what I could at the time. And so, yes, I would highly advise getting that certification. It definitely helps to lay the foundation.
And I'd endorse that. And I say this as a kind of grizzled old predictive project manager, but my catchphrase for the year is all project management is hybrid. And Scrum is just part of the family of different techniques. But if you're going to be a project manager in the modern world and you don't have that set of tools, that set of mindsets to draw upon, then you can't be making the best possible decision about what's right for your project, because you don't understand enough about what, in this case, Scrum can provide. And I think all project managers should be doing as you do, which is embracing the new approach that you discover and learning it. And then, I think we're both, on the same page, then continue just to stretch yourself into new directions. So that's been really fantastic. And you do have a huge wealth of material on your YouTube channel, and a lot of it about Scrum, because that's what you're spending most of your professional life doing, I suppose, at the moment. but not all about Scrum. So there's a lot of general project management advice, which I've enjoyed. So, Alexis, before I let you go, can you tell us how people can find your YouTube channel, what they might find on it, and how they can connect with you online?
Yeah. So my YouTube channel, if you type in the search bar, Project Management Made Simple, and management is just spelled MGMT. Everything else is spelled exactly how you think that it would be spelled. So that's Project Management Made Simple. And the type of content that I do is what you can probably guess, project management content. Yeah. And I've recently branched into talking about agile concepts and the overlaps of that with project management. I have a good video where I'd like to say it's a good video where I actually outline the typical project management concepts and how that overlaps with Scrum to hopefully bridge that gap in understanding there. So I'm also on Instagram as well under Project Management Made Simple. Again, same name there. And I have a website, projectmanagementmadesimple.com. So if anyone's interested in further connecting with me, you can connect with me there as well.
Yeah. Splendid. I'll put all your links down below, and that way people can find you easily. But my last comment is there is a lot of good stuff on your channel, and it needs a bigger audience. It deserves a bigger audience. So hopefully people will click onto it. But for now, Alexis Allen, thank you very much for enlightening us about Scrum.
Thank you so much for having me.
Please do give us a thumbs up if you like this video. I'll be creating loads more great project management content. So please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of it. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.